So for people who don't know Eddie K, right? So Eddie's a newcomer to the movement. He's only been doing it for about 65 years. Uh, right, 65 years ago he was Amanda. Uh, I don't think you ever ran for office though. So Eddie is the. He's running for president. Oh, or maybe he's running for governor on the Working Families Party. So Eddie, for people that don't know, so Eddie, I talked about him in the beginning when I went over the history of NIPAN. So Eddie is the former executive director of Local 1199, which is the largest hospital workers union in the world. And when he first became there, it was a small group, and by the time he left 15 or so years ago, it had 150,000 or more hospital workers in it. And Eddie, there was not an Eddie didn't just tell people to go organize. Eddie went out and did the organizing, right? And stood there and handed out the leaflets and flyers and whatever. And so for people that, and Eddie has been involved he was involved in Bernie Sanders' campaign, and Eddie went to those hospitals and rallied those people for Bernie, and Eddie was very involved and drove around the state with George because of the importance, and Eddie has continued to be involved in the growth of NIPAN. Jumaane, we need you to come up because I can't keep talking. And Eddie was an honoree at our first dinner last January. And because he was the honoree, the mayor of the city of New York and the first lady of the city of New York both came and spoke at our dinner at length about their experiences with Eddie. And he probably raised 3/4 of the money that we got at that dinner. And Eddie was very involved with Jumaane's race, and he wanted to introduce him, and I said, sure. So.
I gave that guy 50 cents to applaud first. How about, can we use that mic? Yeah, that's... Could you fix this mic? Do you hear me? Now you're going to hear Jumaane. Yeah, I pushed myself into this. What am I doing? I'm not even too sure. I'm old, I'm senile, etc., etc. But life is too long not to take up the fight. Am I right or wrong on that? I can't hear you. Oh, Jesus, my God. You know, I'm deaf also. Besides being almost 87, I'm deaf. My eyes are gone. My leg, I got 2 new legs, etc., etc. Listen, how many of you heard of Jumaane Williams about 8 years ago? Raise your hand. Oh, you did. Who asked you? I mean, how many people heard of him 6 years ago? Again, you. All right. But you raised your hand once. What do you want? Special privileges? And I'm only joking. How many people here, besides those 2 wise guys, heard of Jumaane 4 years ago? George, come on up here front. How many people here heard of Jumaane Williams? And where is Jumaane Williams? 2 years ago. I hope you're not lying, because nobody heard of him. Nobody heard. Where the hell did he come from? I don't know. He must have come out of thin air. But you know, it's amazing how we don't know when somebody is saying something. He was a city council person for 8 years, and he changed and helped change the police department from stripping and searching and shouting and arresting, etc., etc. Let's give him a hand over that. My God. How many people knew that he was a delegate to the Bernie Sanders? I didn't even know who the hell he was there, and I was there. How many people, as part of Occupy Wall Street, knew that he was out there fighting just like we were? Isn't this amazing that the guy tried to change so many things that were us, that we are part of it? Am I right or wrong? Were we part of Bernie Sanders, yes or no? I can't hear you. I told you I'm deaf. And it's about time we established. And it's about time we gave credit to a man of all seasons. This is not Thomas More. He's a little younger than Thomas More, although Thomas More might make a showing and show you up, and that's it. And you'll be nothing there, for Pete's sake. The whole trouble is we'll have to resurrect him after 400 years, but it doesn't matter. It is who stood up and took on all these fights over the police department, who stood up and made us go on the map, who stood up and went to Philadelphia and got abused, who stood up and stood and will stand with us. There was one guy that took on every darn thing there is, and he's shaking up. He might shake a little bit, but damn it, he's shaking up this world. And it's about time we gave Jumaane Williams a real hand. Come on up here. Who is he? Take care, bro. Good luck. Jumaane. Jumaane.
Does this come out? What's up, Night Pan? I definitely do shake a little bit. I have Tourette's syndrome, for those who don't know, and ADHD. I want to shout out, what's Mike? President of 504 Democrats, who endorse me. They represent people with disabilities. I want to make sure I give them a shout out. Sometimes they're left out of the discussion, but we got to make sure we continue to keep them in the discussion. Happy engagement. Thank you. You're welcome. I got to shout out my girlfriend, India, in the back. India sneeze, so that's the only reason I'm up here. She helped me with the drive up. So this was kind of last minute, but I wanted to make sure I was here, so I don't have a speech as normally prepared. So hopefully we can do some back and forth questions, if that's okay. But really quick, what's up, Jesse? I just want to say thank you, Naipan, so much for taking a chance on a young black dude from Brooklyn with Tourette's syndromes, when, as Eddie put it, most people across the state had no idea who I was. And because Naipan took a chance, thank you, George, thank you, Tracy, everybody who helped make it happen, and of course, Eddie K, who was out there with me. We shook up the world. We really did shake up the world. We shook up New York State, and it's going to reverberate across this country. Cynthia, myself, Zephyr, we took on powers that people did not want to take up. In my race, although we didn't make the finish line, we got more votes than any non-white candidate ever in a statewide primary. That is amazing. Particularly when we did it with just about $300,000, and she raised over $2 million, not including Cuomo's $30 million. That is a feat. That was because we had a message that was resonating, and because all the people in this room worked their asses off. And the takeaway for me is that it can be done. And it can be done the way we want to do it. And it can be done withholding our principles and not letting them go. I've been told over and over when I first started to now that I was too much of an activist and I was too principled. And I said I'd rather lose an election than take those things away. And I don't want to keep losing. However, we are seeing that you can be principled and you can remain an activist. And that is important, that we don't have to let those things go. That election showed me that people want that. People are looking for that if we have the right people getting those messages across. They had me down, I think 2 weeks before, about 22%. They said we were down. We lost by 6%. That is amazing. We won New York City, which I was surprised by how much we won New York City. We won Columbia, we won Tompkins, and most of the places we only lost 60-40. That sounds like a lot, but most of those places I hadn't even got to personally. So they got our message either from you or the website or whatever little bit of advertising we're able to do. 60-40 is wonderful across the state. That means that yearning is still there, and I hope everybody here takes that further because it's critically important. Cuomo's not a good dude. Let me just say that. And so we have to hold him accountable. We have to hold Democrats accountable because they are imitating Republicans. And it's a scary thing to watch. We don't need Republicans light. We need Democrats who are true to what they say. And what I believe our message showed on that election day is that people want that. They want people to do the things that Democrats are saying they're supposed to be doing. And it's critical. I got elected, was 9 years ago, as I mentioned. I was a community organizer. Most people had heard of me then. I had locks. I never looked like an elected official, but I decided that I was going to jump in and run anyway, and people enjoyed the message, and we were there. And as I like to say, I've been trying to cause as much trouble as possible in the past 9 years that I've been a council member. And I've been proud to take up causes, like many of you here, when people said no. So whether it was the police, like there are things now that people are speaking about that we were told we were crazy. When we were saying that you shouldn't stop more young black men that live in the city of New York, people said we hated police. And we said, no, we don't hate police. We think everybody should be treated equitably and everybody should be policed equitably. And we did what we had to do, and we're now the safest city we've been since 1951. The measures we put in were working and are working. When we talked about legalizing marijuana, everybody thought we were crazy. Now they've adopted that message. Let's see if he holds it, does what he says he's going to do, but at least he's adopted that message. When we said Bernie was the guy, that was the message that people needed to hear. And at least, if you weren't going to have Bernie, at least adopt that message. But they were so stuck to their ways, they didn't do that. And now we have the era that we have here. Well, there was Occupy Wall Street, right? People said we were crazy, but we're not. We got the millionaires tax from that. What we are pushing works, and it is the correct message. We have allowed people to be afraid of words. And so when people hear you want to get rid of Obamacare, just keep my health care. That makes no sense. That makes no sense. And we've allowed people to adopt terms or be afraid of things like democratic socialism. Well, what are you afraid of? Oh, well, do you like your Social Security? So then what are you afraid of? We have to repackage that whole message to show people this is actually what they want. This, shout out to Ian, by the way. Sorry for your race. I just want to make sure I give you a shout out and a hand clap for the race that you're in. This is, it's critically important to know that this is going to be hard. It is not easy. Sometimes people confuse being right with being easy. It is never easy because people in power and privilege don't just give things up. I think most folks would agree that slavery was bad. Owning people are pretty bad. We should probably just not do that. But that's not what worked. We had the bloodiest civil war and killed more Americans than ever combined in other wars. That's how hard it was to just change something that most people innately know is wrong. Privilege just doesn't let things go. I put out a tweet when I saw Mr. Kavanaugh in his righteous indignation and his testimony, and Mr. Graham, the fury in their eyes and in their faces. How dare you? And they were a personification of what happens when privilege is met with social justice, met with equity, met with even a modicum of challenge. Privilege fights back with fury. Like just anything that challenges anybody's privilege, that's the response you get. We've seen it during Reconstruction in this country, when after slavery, and you had the most actually black folks elected in Congress. That was the rise of the KKK. That was the rise of the black codes. That was just a pushback. That was, again, privilege being challenged. And you see during the Me Too movement, it is privilege being challenged. And Donald Trump is a direct result of having the first black president in the country. This is what happens when privilege is challenged. And sometimes people look at me crazy, but I also try to just understand what people's journeys are. So if you are a straight, cisgendered white male and you're rich, you are the pinnacle of privilege in this country. And you've probably walked through life believing the way the world receives you. And so if you see a black president and people who are brown trying to make a living in this country, and your family who may not be rich may be suffering, that's probably a shock to your system, because you were told, or at least told, that you should be someplace and these folks should be someplace else. And if you work hard, you get this thing. And so instead of being told that the system doesn't work like that, the system is one of the best pyramid schemes I've ever seen, and it has to have a lot of poor people on the bottom for rich people. Like, if you were told that, that's a hard thing to do, to fix that system. You're told to believe in that system. Capitalism works, believe it, just work hard. But it's easy to say that you're not going where you need to go because of these people over here, whoever this other is. I just happen to be pretty identifiable as an other. But everywhere, anywhere you've gone in this world, there has been others that have been created, and those others are other scapegoats. And what we know here is that the others aren't a scapegoat. The system is a scapegoat. The system, I always say, is designed to work how it has been working. And so I always say, if the forefathers woke up, they would probably say, I don't know why you had a black president or why women are voting, but otherwise, pretty good job for what we put forth. Because it's moving forward how it's supposed to move forward. We have to jam that up, and we're doing our best to do that. But understand it's going to be difficult, but we have to continue to move forward. This is how it has worked. All of the people that we read in history, all of the people who have made change, this is how it has worked. And our job is not to bring the next generation a perfect society. Our job is to bring the next generation a society that's slightly better than how we found it. We want to make the apple just a little bit shinier. That's what people did for us. That's what people who were in the streets, getting arrested, fire hoses, doing all those things, they were just saying, we got to make it a little bit better than how we found it. And I believe we can do that. It's in a little bit of a dark spot right now. We got orange darkness happening all across the nation. But there are folks like us who are going to be the light in that darkness. There are folks like us that the next generation is counting on to do whatever we can. And our election was a part of that. And I'm just so excited to have been a part of that. And I thank Eddie for all the things that he says I did. I didn't do it. We did it. And that's a serious thing. There's none of those things I could have done by myself. I'm happy that I was able to lend my voice and my ability to speak loudly and shake a little bit so people pay attention. But it's a collective decision. It's a collective victory, and I want to continue to do that. So I don't know, hopefully we could take some questions, because I want to end my spiel there. But I want to say thank you. So like this, I hope people are invigorated by this election. The IDC was destroyed. That's incredible. There is nobody, most folks had no belief that Jeff Klein would be taken out. Like, people might have thought we might have got a couple of them. But the head, nobody thought we took the head out. That's incredible to me. The IDC was destroyed. That's because people woke up and understood what was going on. We're going to keep that going, yes? As I traveled, stay woke, yes. As I traveled across the state, I really found out or reconfirmed that most of the issues that we're dealing with downstate, people are dealing with upstate. It changes slightly by culture. It changes slightly by what the economic driver is and what the local government structure is. But most folks are dealing with things that we're dealing with downstate. Cuomo's MTA just becomes Cuomo's transportation crisis somewhere else, whether it's the roads not being fixed or people not having access to public transportation. Having access to good quality schools has been a theme all across this state. Everybody wants jobs. They don't want these job builders that we get $5 billion in tax abatements or funding and get nothing. The number one thing that's uniting folks are housing. That is something that everybody's seeking and cannot get for one reason or another. I hope that's an issue that people are using to connect upstate, downstate. I know we have housing justice for all, but we have to continue what we're doing. If we had just got a couple more counties upstate, we would have took the lieutenant governor out. That's amazing. That is amazing. And we shouldn't despair in that. We should delight in that, because that just means, and just with a little bit more work, we got them next time. That's just 4 years. Like, we got them next time. And they're shaking in their boots. Please believe me. This black dude from Brooklyn scared the mess out of them. But it wasn't because of me, because I went like this, and everybody was behind me, moving that way. And we just got to continue to do that. So, if there's time, I'd like to open up for any questions that folks may have about what. Oh, okay. I didn't even get to finish out. All right, cool. Oh, what's next for me? So, thank you. So I thank you. I had two different plans. I had a plan to win, and I had a plan to lose. Planning to lose was not actually running for something else right away. It was a totally different plan. I didn't plan to win lose at the same time, which is what happened that day. So we're really trying to figure out exactly what we're going to do. I've been honored that people have been putting my name out for those who are not downstate. There's something called a public advocate, which is actually what I was talking about when I talked about lieutenant governor. I actually said we have a public advocate in the city, but we have nothing like that in the state. I was trying to fashion it to go to the state. Well, it's open now. So I'm honored that people have been putting my name, like right after the election, the day after. They said I was a front runner. I never even said I was running or interested. I'm happy to say that I am seriously considering it, but I just don't know. We're going to try to make a decision in the next week or so. It's a totally different mind frame. I also have close friends who are considering it as well. I've also never been in this position where politicians like to say, "Oh, people told me to run." I ran because I wanted to run. When I ran for city council, when I ran for lieutenant governor, this is the first time that I feel like I'm being drafted. It's the first time I've ever been called a front runner in my life for anything, even for school, graduating. I've never been a front runner, so it's a weird space to be in where everybody's like, "Yeah, you gotta look." That's just. I think I'm more comfortable from behind. Like, I'm more comfortable running uphill. So I just got to figure it out. But I appreciate the question. I hope if we do make the decision to run, I would hope to have the support of NIPAN and folks in here, because we can really make a difference. I appreciate it. And I want to talk it over some more with my girlfriend. So you guys hound her before she leaves. She's not even listening. You're about to get hounded, India. India, she's not even, all right. Just let her have it. Any other questions?
I was so happy to have met you at our night meeting in January, because then it really gave me, I felt the personal wherewithal to advocate for you for lieutenant governor. I'm just wondering, well, I found myself on election day still saying, introducing our IDC challenger candidate at the, outside the polls. Hey, have you heard of Julie Goldberg? And also saying after that, like, oh, and do you know about Jumaane? Really, a lot of people didn't know about either of them. So I was just wondering, what did you think worked for you in reaching the voters that you did reach, and what would have helped more?
Thank you for that. By the way, when I ran in January, again, everybody said I was crazy. There was absolutely no way I had any shot of winning, according to anybody I ever spoke to. The day before election, people were shaking in their boots. So that was exciting, and that was thanks to folks in this room. I will be actually kind of blunt. Money is the reason we lost that election. There's no other reason. We did what we did, like, with nothing. I ran on fumes. $300,000 for a statewide election is nothing. And again, $2 million, like, they bombarded. I don't know how it was upstate, but downstate, every commercial. They actually had a commercial where they said Kathy Hochul's name literally 4 times before the commercial started. Kathy Hochul, Kathy Hochul, Kathy Hochul, Kathy Hochul. It was incredible. And so we did what we can do. We can never underestimate money. And so if I had another 50,000 or 100,000, not even much, we would have won that election, because that would have been used to advertise upstate. We had to make a concentrated, strategic decision to focus the money where we thought we'd pull the most votes. So I didn't have enough money to advertise. I didn't do any radio or any TV outside of New York City, and I only did advertising in 3 of the 5 boroughs. And so we thought, if we get the most populous boroughs and if we win New York City, we'd win the election. But we actually hit most of our goals. So we won Brooklyn, we won Manhattan, we almost won Queens. I think we only lost by 8,000, and we won New York City. We won New York City 55-45. So by our and we hit our win number. By our markers, we should have won. Who knew that the win number was between 450,000 and 550,000 for us, and we got 640,000 people who voted. She just got more, but we did that running against every county in the state and almost every elected official who endorsed our opponent. Like everybody, it was people were scared to come out to support. So it was excellent. But one, I would say money. Two, we should start a little earlier. If we start a little earlier, we get to people a little earlier. But I couldn't get to all of the places folks wanted me to get to in the truncated time, and that time it moves quicker the closer you get to election day. So starting earlier and a little bit more money, I think were the main focus. Because I really think everybody did what they could have done. Like, I'm not sure. We can always do more, but I feel like my team, which was a ragtag team, my campaign was put together with Scotch tape. But we did everything we hit the numbers we were supposed to hit. So I just would say time and money. And when you look at the race and the money, if I was a Democratic establishment, our race is the number one reason they don't want public financing in the state. Because if there was public financing, there's no way that they would have survived. The reason I'm here is because of public financing. When I ran for city council in New York City, we have public financing. And so that's the reason they're scared of, because they just have a lot more money. But I still believe that activist energy can beat millionaire money, and we can. So I think we can, raise a little bit more. There were some folks who really just didn't believe that I'd get as far, and they just didn't. They put their money elsewhere, and people didn't even know what a lieutenant governor was. So I actually helped the lieutenant governor out. Her name is much more well known now, and people actually know what a lieutenant governor is. And so the time is like I've realized wherever I went to speak to talk about what a lieutenant governor is and what I envision it to be, people activated and people understood. So I think, even if we didn't raise the extra 100, we raised the extra 50 or 25. If we had started a little earlier, getting the message out about what the lieutenant governor is, per se, what it can do, and the message, I think we would have done fine. Does that help? Yes? No? Okay.
I have to agree with you about the money because I'm still waiting for the literature. Andy says it's coming. Definitely, that is something that needs to be worked on. Your next campaign.
Yeah. Well, I don't know what it'll be. If it is PA, there is public financing there, so that does help level the playing field. But I mean, there's things we can also do. That the time is important too. Like, we can make decisions quicker to get out there. I'm sorry you didn't get delayed.
I have some in my car.
So it was a Democratic primary. So we have a lot of people who maybe didn't come out to vote, and we really would have liked them to come vote. Or in general, maybe we just want open primaries so we can mobilize people and outvote certain Democrats. So my question is what do we make of and what do we say to these certain Democrats that we're trying to overcome within the Democratic Party? Because there must have been people who voted for Cuomo and voted for you, and it's just a very confusing place to be in the party right now. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah. It's not some. There was a lot. The crossover of the vote was tremendous. Particularly in New York City, it seems that people voted for Cuomo, me, and Tish. That's unfortunately the way that broke down. We got 100,000 more votes than the top of the ticket, even though 100,000 less people voted. And so people really made a concerted effort. And I think that the voting population on both sides very often go with what they know, even when what they know is not good. And so we have to overcome that. I mean, that's a huge part of it. A huge part is getting that message out that what you know is still harmful. Cuomo he was bred to be a politician, And so he's very good at politics. Like, he's extremely good at politics. And what I'm hoping the Democratic Party at some point will stop giving us people to vote against and will give us people to vote for, or at least have a message that's not vote against this message, but adopt. Because that's the primary reason that we have Donald Trump. And I don't want to do a Hillary Bernie thing, because I was Bernie, fine. But even the message, they are more concerned about incumbency protection and raising money than anything else. So they give us bad messages and bad candidates, and people like Cuomo, where corruption is surrounding him, literally surrounding him. He'll say one thing today and do something else tomorrow. He uses the same fair tactics. I mean, besides the bigotry and vitriol, because he's not that, but besides that, he just is Donald Trump. Like, it's the same thing. Whether it was the race they use, the xenophobia, the anti-Semitism they use, the fear they use, it's the same thing. And it is a Democratic Party that was doing this. There was a Democratic Party that said people should be scared to vote, scared of me because I'm a charismatic young black man. It was a Democratic Party who said Cynthia was an anti-Semite. It was a Democratic Party who used class politics to talk about my debt and tried to debt shame me. That was a Democrat. That was Andrew Cuomo. His top aides are literally going to jail, like literally going to jail. He has he lies today, and just we catch him tomorrow. He says something totally different. It's fascinating to see people watch that and allow it, and it's fair. And so we have to try to I can't tell people. I always say people try to say I'm fearless, and I'm not. I have a lot of fear. I just try to have a commensurate amount of courage, and so I try to tell people it's okay to be afraid. That's human, but let's match that with the courage to move forward. The only thing that he can do is the only thing that he can do is not allow me to get elected to something. And that has to be okay. That risk has to be okay. My colleagues and people in politics love to celebrate people who risked their lives in the past, and they won't even risk a title. But we have to at least risk the title. And if we all risk the title, we're going to move somewhere. And so that's just, I went off a little bit. But the Democratic Party just has to be held accountable. It has to be held on, has to be honest about itself. And I support open primary, just to begin with. But I think we have to, next time and for what we start now, we have to change our message a little bit. It's unfortunate, but people apparently don't care about corruption as much as they should, unless you can walk up to Cuomo and say, this is how you did it, bing. Otherwise, it just wasn't the message that was working. And maybe we should realize that and switch up, because I think there were other messages that might have stuck. And so we should grow a little bit and be a little bit more strategic and find out, well, what a message. We know what hits us, right? But that doesn't always hit the voter, because the voter across the state, yeah, corruption, everybody does that, but I need a job. And yeah, everybody whatever, but I can't drive my car to get where I need to go. And so we may need to just switch up the message slightly, so that it's an organizer. Everybody, people organizers. When you go to this door and they're not buying or connecting with what you're saying, and they tell you something, you don't always use what you came to the door with to the next door. You use what this person said to the next door. And so we have to learn to do that a little bit better, I think. And then maybe we can get there. Any other question? Did you raise your hand, India? I saw your hand go up. You might get you weren't listening, but a lot of people might come to you after. Don't worry about it. My treasurer author, yes. Lawyer, sorry, yes.
In the beginning of this meeting yesterday, I said that I thought that what happened with your candidacy was an indication of how important it was for the Bernie-cratic progressive movement to unite with progressives in the Black and Hispanic community. That Bernie was 42, no support in the Black community. We got to 47. Zephyr in 2014 was at 33. I want to know what you what you think that, if you would agree with that, as like, that's the direction we need to go.
The coalition is critically important. It's not going to happen without the coalition of everybody. Progressive whites, black, Latino, disability community, the LGBTQ community, everybody has to be there. And the more that happens, the more we push back, right? And we have to be better at coalition building without co-option. And so people are often afraid of the coalition because they feel that they will be co-opted. And another thing that scares people, if we're going to have an honest discussion, and it goes back to Martin Luther King, who discussed sometimes being more worried about progressive white allies. And there is still a fear, rightfully so, in many of communities of more color about white allies. And so when our progressive white allies come into the space, the hope is that they will come into that space with that understanding and understand why it's there, because there has been two things that have happened that have been frustrating. Sometimes co-option happens with whatever space it's in. And the second thing is even worse. Oftentimes, there are intersecting problems and issues, but when the issue most closely associated with the progressive white ally is fixed, they leave the communities of more color alone to fight the battle. And so that is a frustrating thing, and we should understand that as we're going forward, that that's a fear. One of the best cases I've seen it actually work were Black Lives Matter. I saw progressive white allies show up, understand the problem, and allow black leaders to be in the forefront and decide the agenda and to push forward. That was one of the best cases I've seen happen. I also saw it happen a lot when I did the work around Stop, Question, and Frisk. The people who were mostly associated with the issues were out front, whether it was black, Latino, particularly transgender Latino women were in the front leading the conversation. So that's important. It's a key thing to make that coalition work, because if it works, there's nothing they can do about it. Like literally, if that coalition works, there is just absolutely nothing that the powers can do about it. And that's why they work so hard to make sure that coalition doesn't work. But we've showed that it is working, and we're going to continue to grow. We're going to continue to make sure that the coalition is built and that co-opting doesn't happen, and that everybody respects everyone's vision and we don't leave anyone behind. That's important. We're in it together, so we're going to stick together. And so even when we come out of this dark space, we just want to remember, I mean, there are folks that showed up now, which is great because we're in the orange madness. But sometimes some of us sit back and say, people of more color have been dealing with these issues for a very long time, and no one believed us. And so that's an important thing. And that actually, my experiences as a black man actually helped me with the Me Too movement, because a lot of men may not be honest, but when you first start hearing it, sometimes your mind might jump to not immediately questioning before you should question. But I remember when I did that, I was like, there's a lot of folks who didn't believe my experience as a black man. And that immediately helped me say, hold on, I'm going to accept what is being said here and try to be the best ally I can be to make sure that they understand I believe them, I see them, and I support them. And so it's important to have those experiences and just have an understanding of the space you're in and the space that someone who has an experience that you may not understand, and accept that in the space as well. That was a long answer to your question, but I hope it was helpful. Am I up, Tom? Oh, I got water here. Thank you. Sure.
Are you involved in the New York State Democratic Committee? Are you planning on going to the conference tomorrow?
New York State Democratic Committee. No, I'm not. I'm not. So I'm not. Where is it? Where's me help? Oh no, that should be fun. We had a county committee down in Brooklyn. If anybody lives in New York City, that was. I did. Whew. That's crazy. But you know, the Democrats are crazy, man. They hold on to power just like anybody else, and it is a frustrating thing. I would say as we seek to break up that system, just have to remember what we're in, and how we're feeling, because oftentimes reformers become the system, and forget the lessons of how we felt once we got there. And so it's very easy to succumb to some of the same things when we get there. So I just hopefully, because we're gonna knock the leadership out at some point. That's gonna happen if we keep moving forward. But hopefully we remember how we feel right now, how we felt as Bernie delegates when they were treating us like crap in Philadelphia, how they treated us on the floor of the state committee when Cynthia and I couldn't get a word in edgewise. Let's just don't forget that feeling when we become victorious.
It's 4 o'clock.
Oh. I thought it was Cuomo. I'm like, okay. Any other questions?
Yeah, the AOC effect went over to Julius Salazar, and there was some growth in the Latino vote over there. Maybe in Queens or whatever. Do you think you felt that maybe affected that? I know we didn't do it on the front.
I think we felt it all over. I think what did Cuomo say? It was a trickle, a ripple. He said, "Man, he's just in shock." It was definitely a wave, and the tsunami's coming. The IDC, taking out the IDC at the head, is not a ripple. It just is not a ripple. What happened in my race, even though we didn't get to the finish line, that's not a ripple. They had to spend a tremendous amount of money to defend an incumbent seat. Like, that's not a ripple. So the effect is there. We're going to get better at strategizing how to use it and how to harness it. And as Arthur mentioned, it's growing and keep going up. And we just have to keep doing that. So I felt her presence there. It's very hard to run a statewide race. You have to understand, like, it's not easy, but we felt it at the bottom because it's easier to affect those races in a small voter universe, so you can feel effect. Even remember Ocasia's race, it was a congressional race, but it's a small voter universe. We tried to do it across the entire state. We did pretty damn good for the entire state. We did pretty damn good. So I want to make sure we always applaud that. It's always better to win, but I'd rather lose the way I lost than to win the way some other people win. Thank you.
Ron said something about we have to be spiritual and imagine, and I have decided we all need to start meditating, having a group meditation, and meditate Trump out, Bernie in, and Jumaane, Kathy out, and Jumaane in. Then take a deep breath and let's just meditate.
I'm a spiritual dude. I walk with the Most High, so I don't think I'd be here without that kind of guidance and that kind of a central figure. And most of what I do is rooted in that, so I believe in that fully. And so wherever folks get their grounding, church, synagogue, mosque, or just believing in good, I believe in harnessing that and bringing it down. So I just want to say thank you so much. Before I leave, I'm going to say it's time. You say let's go. It's time. Let's go. It's time. Let's go. It's time. Peace, Night Pen. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.